so I haven't done a club building video in a while. So today we're going to be talking all about ferrules. I'm going to give you my best tips for getting these ferrules onto the golf club. Let's go. Hi everyone, welcome to the Mobile Club Maker. I'm AJ, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Okay, so I've done videos about finishing ferrules or turning down ferrules where you sand them down, polish them up so they look nice and professional when they're on. But I get a lot of questions from people asking, how do I get the ferrule onto the golf club in the first place? Because I'm having a lot of trouble, it's getting stuck. That happens all the time, right? These little ferrules, these little pieces of plastic, sometimes they're bigger, sometimes they're smaller. Sometimes the shaft diameter is a little bigger, a little smaller based on how much chrome or paint is on there. So you can run into this issue where it's hard to get these little guys on. So today I'm going to show you my best tips and tricks to get the ferrules on nicely so you don't damage them and have a nice finished presentation in the end. Okay, so the first scenario when you're putting together a golf club with a ferrule is you go to put the ferrule on, you get it started, and then it gets stuck. This ferrule, maybe you can see that, it's only about halfway onto that shaft, and obviously we need it well further on there so that the shaft is sticking out beyond the bottom of it. So the first, simplest way to do this is to just basically take the shaft with the ferrule on it and just push down on a hard surface and just sort of move it down as best you can to move the ferrule onto the shaft. As you can see, now the shaft and the edge of the ferrule are in line. Now obviously we need to get it further than that. So what we're going to use next is just this little block of wood that I've put a hole drilled through the bottom of it. This hole is wider than the diameter of any shaft I'm going to use, so it's wider than 370, but it's narrower than the outside diameter of any of these ferrules. And what we're going to do here, we're just going to line this up over that hole and just continue to push down and work the ferrule onto the club like this. So at this point we've got the shaft about a little over 1/4 of an inch through, getting close to a 1/2 inch. And here we can now switch and actually use the actual head that we're going to be using and use it to get the ferrule fully on the shaft. And very simply what we're going to be doing here, we're going to put the shaft inside the hosel of the golf club and we're just going to tap down the shaft on the ground, holding the club basically like this so that the force of my tap is coming straight down here. We don't want to tap it and be holding it like this where we could be bending the shaft as we tap down. We want to have a straight line. So I'm tapping down, straight down, right through the hosel like this. And we're just going to tap this down on the ground to get the shaft fully in and get that ferrule all the way up. Okay, so just a couple quick points when we're talking about this first method of using just the block of wood with a hole drilled in it. Obviously, you can buy ferrule installation tools that can be metal or plastic. Basically the exact same premise, just pre-drilled with a hole in it. Sometimes they have a different size hole for woods and irons. Obviously, you could do all this same stuff yourself. You could drill a different size hole for that 370 tip versus the 335 tip. Just depends how elaborate you want to make it. For me, just the very basic thing like that, just the little piece of wood with a hole in it that's bigger than the widest shaft I'm going to use, but smaller than the ferrule size is perfect because that's all I need is to get it started. Now, from there, when we're talking about doing this tap down method, again, making sure that you're tapping down, hitting on the hosel side. Don't go trying to tap it down on this side because you can possibly bend the shaft, or if you're working with graphite, you can snap it. So we're going to hit down on this side. The other thing to remember, if we're working with a steel shaft, no problem. You can tap it down on concrete, you can tap it down on asphalt, you can tap it down on a rock. It doesn't make a bit of difference. But if you're working with graphite, you can't do that. You want to make sure you have some sort of padded surface that you're hitting it down on because that graphite can splinter, it can chip, and you don't want that to happen. So use some sort of either a rug, a carpet, a little piece of felt, something like that to tap the graphite shaft down so you're not just banging it onto a hard concrete surface. Okay, the other thing to remember when we're talking about this tap down method is if you're going to be doing any sort of re-weighting of the head, and by that I mean you're going to be using something like this, a little shaft tip weight, or you're going to need a brass shim to get a better, more snug fit between that shaft and the hosel. If you're going to be using either of these things, you want to make sure when you're using this tap down method that you use these while you're sizing, while you're getting the spacing right on that ferrule. So if you're going to be using tip weights, you want to make sure you put that tip weight in there and then start tapping it down. Likewise, if you're going to be using a brass shim, you want to get that brass shim on there before you start tapping it down. The other tip I'm going to give you right here is listen when you're tapping it down, because when you're putting the ferrule on and you're tapping it down, it will have one sound that it makes as you hit it on the ground. When that shaft actually bottoms out and is hitting or sitting against the bottom of the hosel of the head, it's going to have a different sound. You will be able to hear it, trust me. And when you hear that change in tone, that's when you know that you've gotten the ferrule all the way on as far as it needs to go. Okay, so you try the tap down method and say you get it about this far, which is good, but it's obviously not far enough to actually hold that golf club on. So how do you get that ferrule all the way down to where it needs to be? Let me show you. Okay, real quick, 3 different methods. The last one is going to be by far the one I recommend the most, but 3 different methods for helping you get that stubborn ferrule on if you can't just get it tapped on just using the block and tapping it down on the ground. First off, obviously this ferrule is not wanting to go on more than just a little bit. And we could put it in here, push down on it, but it's still barely moving. So the first option, we're going to get our heat gun. And what we're going to do here, and let me get a glove, is we're going to heat up the steel shaft, basically right here. We're going to heat this area up. That heat is going to move, transfer heat up towards the tip. The whole thing's going to heat. The plastic is going to soften up, and it should make it a little easier to get the ferrule to slide on using the block and using the tap down method. So it'll look like this. Again, we want to make sure that we are not putting the heat directly on the ferrule because that will melt it pretty darn quick. So we're trying to keep the heat on the shaft. This is only something you would want to do also with a steel shaft. You would not want to use this method with graphite because you could damage the graphite shaft. So we're going to go about 10-15 more seconds. Okay. And then remember, this is going to be hot, so don't go touching that shaft without some sort of glove on. And now we can fit that on there. Press it down and start to work it on that way. Okay, so in this case we've got a graphite shaft and a ferrule. And we can get the ferrule on part of the way, but then it's going to get stuck. It's getting stuck here at the paint, and it's not wanting to go on all the way. You could try and force it. You could obviously try and sand down more of the paint to get a little bit smaller diameter shaft for the hosel so that the ferrule fits over it. But here's the second option you could also do, which is instead of heating up the shaft, we're just going to heat up the ferrule itself. And in this case, I'm just going to let the heat gun just sort of warm up that ferrule a little bit. This method is a little bit more precarious as far as you have to be careful that you don't inadvertently melt the ferrule because it doesn't take too much to go from being warm to all of a sudden deforming. So you have to be a little more careful with this method. Obviously, again, be careful, don't burn yourself with it. And we're just sort of looking for the ferrule to get just a little bit softer so that we can then take it, pick it up, the ferrule may be a little warm, so be careful, slide it on like that, and then using the block method, it'll slide on very easily in this case once we've heated it up just a little bit. Okay, if neither of those other methods seem like a great fit for you, this is by far the easiest one to do, and all it takes is a bowl of hot water. So I've got a ferrule here. I can get it started on, but I can't really get it all the way on. It's a little bit tight. It's also a very thick ferrule, so it might be hard to push on. I'm just going to drop it in this bowl of hot water. Now this is just a bowl of water I put in the microwave for about 45 seconds to a minute, depending on your microwave strength. And we're just trying to get the water to not boiling, but hot. So just hot water. Again, all we're trying to do is soften up the plastic a little bit, make it a little more malleable so that we can get it onto the shaft a little bit easier. We're gonna let this sit about 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna fish it out with this little popsicle stick so I don't have to touch the hot water. And then we're gonna put it on and see how it goes. Okay, let's give it about 10 more seconds. And we'll fish it out. It'll be a little bit warm. And take it, put it on, and you will see, you can already see it's sliding on much further. And if we need to, we can bring in the little wood block. And as you can see, that took basically no effort to get it all the way on there. If I needed to go a little bit further, there you go, all the way on. So that's 3 different methods to heat up the plastic in that ferrule to get it a little bit more malleable, make it a little bit easier to get onto the shaft. And that's really the secret if you're having trouble with stubborn ferrules, is you just need to soften that soften that plastic up a little bit. So whether that's heating the steel shaft up a little bit to heat up the plastic to get it to slide on, whether that's heating the ferrule up directly with a heat gun, or by far the easiest, the most foolproof method, and the method I would definitely recommend if you're getting started with this or you're just getting into golf club building, is the hot bowl of water. That hot bowl of water makes it very simple. It's very difficult to mess anything up. You're not gonna melt the ferrules. You're not gonna mush them or deform them in any way just using that hot water. Heck, if I was doing a set of irons just starting out, I would get myself a nice sized bowl of that hot water. I would dump all the ferrules in there at one time and then just fish them out as I go, as I'm prepping them and putting them together so that they're hot, they're malleable, they're ready to be slid onto that shaft without any issues. Okay, again, if you have questions about finishing ferrules once you've actually gotten them on and epoxied the club together, I've got videos for that. I will leave a couple down in the description below. If you have any other questions or comments, please leave those down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you can be alerted when I post new videos. I'm on Patreon. You can find me at AJ Golf, and I'm also on Instagram. You can find me at Mobile Club Maker. Take care. We will see you next time. Bye.